Hello, everybody. Distinguished speakers, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning, afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining us. Artificial intelligence is now part of our daily life. AI-based applications in healthcare are considered to have the potential for making care better, more efficient, affordable, and hence accessible. In recent years, there has been a significant increase in research papers about machine learning and artificial intelligence in oral radiology. We must learn, understand, and adapt to this new reality. The purpose of this seminar is to share knowledge, ideas, concepts, and research about AI in oral radiology. Today, we are delighted to welcome all of you to this discussion regarding artificial intelligence as a diagnostic and research tool in dentistry. To our eminent speakers and all participants, I'm greatly honored and pleased to welcome you on behalf of the first international meeting on dental research of Federal University of Goiás. We are indeed honored to have you all here with us. I also want to give very special thanks to Carla Vasconcelos and Karine Evangelista for the great support. Please make your comments and questions on the chat so we can answer in the discussion section. As first speaker, I would like to welcome Professor Jonas Bianchi to talk about data science applied to temporomandibular joint diagnosis using AI. Dr. Bianchi is an assistant faculty professor of orthodontics at the University of Pacific. His research is centered on data science approaches and artificial intelligence to create decision support systems in dentistry, especially in orthodontics, TMJ, osteoarthritis, and orthodontic surgery. Currently, Dr. Bianchi works at the Craniofacial Research Instrumentation Laboratory with orthodontic residents from the University of Pacific and maintain collaboration with the University of Michigan, State of São Paulo University, Kitware Incorporation, and the University of North Carolina, using non-identified CBCT images, patient data, and open source software. Those data are also used to train machine learning algorithms to perform image tasks such as bone and teeth segmentation, mandibular condyle analysis, treatment decision support in orthodontic surgery, and more. His main goal is to maintain multidisciplinary research with programmers, computational scientists, and mathematicians to be able to integrate the different data features, providing personalized and better treatment to patients. Thank you very much, Professor Bianchi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonas Bianchi. I am assistant professor at the University of the Pacific in San Francisco, California, in the United States. Bom dia a todos. É prazer estar aqui. I would like to say thank you to the UFG, to the all organizational people that worked in this conference, the first international meeting of dental research. It is a pleasure to be talking to you all, guys. I would appreciate your time that you're spending here. And Goiânia is a beautiful city, even though I don't know Goiânia yet, but I hope that I can go there one day. I have close friends there, such as Professor Karine, Maria, thank you for the invitation. Camila is just a new professor there, substitute professor. Pedro Paulo Chaves de Souza is a close friend of mine. He was my mentor, so I have a lot of friends there, and his brother as well, João. So I have a lot of good people there in Goiânia, so thank you very much. And I'll talk today about data science, artificial intelligence in the diagnosis of TMJ osteoarthritis. This work was done back in Michigan. And I work as well right now in the Crow Lab at the University of the Pacific, and it's a collaborative work with Professor Sevi Dennis from Michigan. And I am from Araraquara, São Paulo, and I did my dental degree at the dental school, UNESCO. And I did scientific initiation there with Professor Pedro in biomolecular area. I did my orthodontics degree there with professors from Araraquara, Dr. Gandini, Dr. Ari, Dr. Dirceu, Dr. Lydia, Dr. João Gonçalves was my mentor, my master's and doctorate and PhD. And I went to the Netherlands as well for 2 months during my scientific initiation, where I did research with Professor Pedro. And then I went to Michigan, where I did research with Dr. Sevi Dennis. And I met Professor Karini there as well when I was doing part of my PhD and postdoctoral in Michigan. And right now I'm in the Pacific, in the University of the Pacific. I'm assistant professor of orthodontics here. So that was my path, my trajectory so far. And right now I'm talking to all of you here to inspire you guys. I want to say thank you for all those people that work close with me in this project. And right now I have my first master students that I'm advising. It's Pedro, he's from Araraquara, he's presenting this conference as well. And Dr. Sevidan, she's the leader of all of this work. So she's been leading with NIH grants, and she's been working close with Karine as well, Camila, and other collaborators. So I would say thank you very much, Dr. Sevidan, for all the work that you have done. I'm really grateful for meeting you. And Dr. O is the chair here in our department, and she's allowed me to keep doing my research and give me research and people that I can keep contributing to science. And those are people that were important. There are some people that I'm missing here, and Dr. Gonçalves, he is my mentor. Always was my mentor. He is a surgeon. I think some of you know him very well because he gave some lectures. But he was my mentor in my master's and my PhD. He always helped me in my mentor in life. So thank Dr. João Gonçalves so very much. And Dr. Gandini is here as well. He's an orthodontist that helped me a lot growing in the orthodontics profession. Let's start talking about my research. I'm going to present some topics about AI and data science, and this towards to this paper that we published recent about decision support system, CHMJ, a review of data science, artificial intelligence. So I will talk about this. This work was granted by the NIH. We have a grant that we did this research, and CAPS as well helped me with my sandwich PhD that I could develop part of this work. Artificial intelligence applied in orthodontics and CHMJ region decision support systems are all correlated areas because CHMJ osteoarthritis is a disease that gets worse within time. And patient, he develop usually open bite degeneration of the CHMJ condyles, and then we need to somehow to work with the data, clinical data that we have available to do an early diagnosis for those patients. And how do we do early diagnosis for degenerative joint disease? Nowadays, it's almost impossible without an MRI and without following up the patient throughout the time. So nowadays, we have the clinical assessment, we have subjective radiological interpretation, soft tissue change in MRI can be detected, and then we can see if our condyle has a chronic stage of CHMJ OA or is health. And how about the early stage of OA? We don't have a way to diagnose precisely, and that's why we want to use some AI tools and data science tools to try to diagnose our patient early on. This is just a slide showing that patients that didn't report any pain, how they have deterioration in their TMJs in their condyles, such as osteophytes, erosion, flattening, and etc. This was a paper showing TMJ patients and asymptomatic patients, how they showed those clinical radiological findings. And we published this paper in PLOS ONE recently. So the big challenge now is how can we go from a single biomarker for detecting disease, such as osteoarthritis, to a multiple biomarkers? How can we do this shift to detect, diagnose the disease? We want to go from here, having a TMJ initial states and not only diagnosing the chronic states or health. We want to see if our patient it is in initial states. And for that, we may use some decision support systems. And decision support systems, they can be fully computerized, human-powered, or combination of both. Some examples of human-powered decision support systems are the RDC TMD that gave us some guidelines on how to diagnose degenerative joint disease. But we also have medical softwares that help us in our decision making. GPS road as well as a computer decision processing that we use for guiding our car, for going to different places. And then business and economics, we have also decision support systems. And decision support systems are directly applied to data science and artificial intelligence. That is a small field of data science. That is a small field of this whole decision support systems. And we have these repositories such as Big Mouth. It is a decision support repository for data of different universities of the United States. So we have data from patients, from charts of different patients that help us to do the final diagnosis based on multiple data. So imagine how much data we have from different charts here in this repository. And data science approach goes from data acquisition, this is a CPCT of a TMJ from a patient, goes to data extraction, assessment, data management and storage, and data processing. So all those steps need to be followed in order to have a good data science approach. And with a good data science approach, we can improve our clinical decision support system. And how we do that? So let's start with data acquisition and standardization. We are in the big data era. We have many data from exams, from clinical parameters, from cloud storage, but we don't know how to organize those. So we need to do a good acquisition of data and standardization of the data. If you have two CPCTs and one CPCT is totally different from the other, it will be hard to do any kind of research or machine learning approach with those heterogeneous data. So we need to do this standardization. And we are in such a big data area that even for astronomy, agriculture, engineer field, and health science field, we all in the same page in terms of data. We have so much data right now that we don't know what to do with those data. And that's why data science approaches are important, and artificial intelligence as well can help us to use those data in our favor. I just have some papers here about big data in healthcare. So you see that this is a really recent topic. There's a lot of papers published on big data, machine learning, and dentistry. And here I have an example of CBCT MRI, a combination of CBCT and MRI, and a segmentation of soft tissue such as the TMJ disc and hard tissue based on the fusion of CBCT and MRI. So we can use our data just as the data itself, the single exam, and then making this use of both, but we can use those as variables that can go in artificial intelligence model. And data acquisition standardization as well goes towards the standardization of the region of interest that we have, our CPCT, the voxel size and machine parameters. So all of those can differ between CPCT images, and then we want to have the same. So we can do some approach in order to have a better image. We can do filtering in the images. We can apply a Gaussian filter that changes the image. We can apply the same voxel size for the image. The idea is that the software needs to have a standardized and similar image in order to do faster processing and in order to have a better accuracy in the results depending on our tasks. And for this, we need to have quality in the data and standardization of the data. So for example, for AI approach or imaging approach, we have this image here, and then we do some image processing steps that turns the image in black and white only. And this helps our machine to extract data. We also can do extraction from different patients. We can do protein extraction, not extraction, but assessment of clinical signs and symptoms of TMJ. And then we can take as well CPCT of the TMJ. So here we have multi-source data that can be extracted and storage for diagnosis purpose later on different machine learning models. And data mining as well is a new topic. What is data mining? Data mining, we take some patterns from the image, and then we try to extract much more information than we can see in the naked eye. In the TMJ condyle, data mining will be towards to extracting some radiomics parameters from a condyle. So from a single surface of the condyle that you can't see anything in the naked eye, you can use some computational approach and then extract information from this grayscale image here. So we did this in a paper as well. We extract a region of interest in the lateral region of the condyle, and then we extract the bone morphometry for this patient and radiomics. So radiomics are all those image variables, as we can see here, that we can extract from a single slice of the TMJ, and then we can try to use this as data in our machine learning approach. And then we did a paper as well showing the comparison to analyze the bone radiomics from those TMJ condyles. So we extract a region of the condyle, and then we did this radiomics. And our paper showed that the imaging variables or the radiomics are different between the condyles, normal condyles with bone loss and bone sclerosis. So we are in the phase of extraction of the data and trying to extract as much as we can information from the condyle, but at the same time in a standardized way. We have also data management and storage. We can storage our data in a web system that we are developing with Dr. Septans and collaborators, who is a great lead for the CBIA project. It's the name of the web system that we use. And here we can storage our data and also do imaging processes inside of a web system. So we can store CBCT, digital dental models, proteins, blood, and clinical variables as well in this cloud system. And data processing is the processing itself, image processing, classification, 3D segmentation, such as 3D segmentation of the condyle, imaging orientation of the condyle, so we can put all the condyles the same orientation in order to do imaging and machine learning processing algorithms running without problems. And then artificial intelligence that can be done in the cloud. So this is just a fun picture showing that statistics, and then the guy put a picture on it, and then it becomes machine learning, and then there's a lot of people watching. So remember that machine learning, it's nothing more than statistics. So sometimes we can think about machine learning, artificial intelligence as something supernatural, but just remember that artificial intelligence is pure statistics applied using some different equations, nothing more than that. And then about artificial intelligence, I just did a recent research with just these two words and found 22 papers on artificial intelligence and machine learning in the AJODO. So just in Orthodontics journal has about 22, Angle Orthodontics, another journal, has 16. And the oldest one that I found was in AJODO, that's Orthodontics journal, was 1988. And then they were talking about the AI can help us to simulate the thinking process of human beings. So back there, they were talking about already this, how the computer can help us. But then the artificial intelligence, as I said, requires approach to have homogeneous and standardized data. That's why we need to have data science approach in order to have a good data to run our algorithms. So if you have different data, imagine that these houses are CBCT scans from different centers, and each one acquire with different acquisition protocols. So first thing that we need to do is try to standardize those data. Because if I just ask the computer, which of the houses were drawn by children from 0 to 5 and 6 to 10. Our brain can think that this house was 6 to 10 years old, right? The children that draw it. And those are 0 to 5. But the computer, he can't make this association. He needs to do picture extractions in order to make the judgment. So he needs to have thousands of the same image and then extract some pictures. And which pictures the computer can extract? It can first do a standardization of the image, making all black and white, for example, and then extracting features such as the angle of the roof or number of windows, and then makes the decision processing based on the features. And then it can separate our sample between complex and basic geometries, and then say that this was 0 to 5 and this was 6 to 10 years old. So that's kind of how the machine works, and for the condile is the same. So you have your input, can be either cat or a dog. You have features extraction. In our case, in condile's case, is clinical features, imaging features, biomolecular features, and then the machine learn does the training using equations and then give output. This is a cat, this is a dog. And we can use in the TMJ's region the AI to do condile segmentation, disease prediction, feature selection, and classification of the condylar shape. In this work that I'm showing here, we did 10-fold cross-validation to do our classification for patients that had osteoarthritis. And then we did leave one out cross-validation to training our machine learning to do disease classification. This is just 3 graphs showing how the cross-validation works, but usually we want to have this kind of classification. Some patients are classified right and some wrong, but this is like the human error. Because if you have this kind of classification in your AI model, this is too good to be true. And this is too bad. So it's not doing good classification for the start. So we need to have an average with low training error and low test error. This is just another picture showing that, hey, get back to work. And then the machine learning said, I'm training. Oh, carry on. So why is this? Because it takes a lot of time to machine for training and learning from the data. That's why we have this picture here. And this paper also, we have some results and discussions. So for example, segmentation of the condyles. This is 2 images with high resolution, less resolution. And then with AI tools, we can do mandibular segmentation using imaging processing techniques. Also, we can do mandibular segmentation with data. So we can provide to our machine learning model ground truth with a lot of images, and then the machine learning can do automatic segmentation using that as training. We can also detect shape of the condyles to classify our condyles as a lot of degeneration or no degeneration at all. This is a paper that uses AI to classify our condyles based on the shape. And this was the one of the last paper that we published using multi-source biomarkers to diagnose TMJ osteoarthritis. We use a group of patients, control patients, and patients with initial osteoarthritis. And then we had biomolecular markers, imaging markers, and clinical markers. All of those markers were imported to the machine learning model. And then after training our machine learning model, we have the features that were more important to our model. So from all the features that we trained, we have clinical imaging biomolecular. We ended up with those features to use in our artificial intelligence model. We tested 4 different machine learning models, and we ended up with the best model that was LightGPM XGBoost to classify the disease. My last question will be, how can we integrate data among professionals to improve our clinical decisions? So the answer will be doing data science approach. We need to have standardization of the data. We need to have a good data extraction, storage, and data processing. So to the ones that want to go forward with research, remember that data is important. We need to save our data. We need to have a standardized data, and we need to communicate with among us in order to collaborate and having more data from different centers in order to train our models. remember the paper that I showed? So the author back in 1988 said, once we have developed data regarding soft tissue, we could use the AI to predict soft tissue movement. So they said this in 1988, and they were still trying to work in the data. So we are still trying to have a good data science approach. So keep that in mind, because in the future, if you have a good data science approach, our AI models can be more robust and better. So this is just another picture showing to you to choose your data science adventure. How are you making decisions? Yes. How many? Lots using data. You want machine learning. You want statistics. You want data analytics. So you need to choose your path to see if you really need machine learning approach or just conventional statistics. Thank you so very much. Again, those are my family, my wife, my little daughter, my dog. That's my son as well, and I love them so much. Thank you. Bye.
Very nice presentation, Professor Bianchi. Thank you very much. To talk about the future of AI in dentistry, I would like to welcome Professor Ruben Pauwels. Ruben Pauwels is a Master in Biomedical Science, Master in Medical Imaging, and PhD in Biomedical Sciences. After his studies at the University of Leuven, Belgium, he worked as a lecturer at Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok, in Thailand, as a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Leuven, and as a visiting at the Aarhus Institute of Advanced Studies, Aarhus University in Denmark. Thank you very much, Professor Ruben Pauwels. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Professor Maria. Sorry, I just lost the connection just now. What a timing! But I hope everything is okay. If not, please interrupt me and we will fix it. So it's an honor and a pleasure to be able to talk here virtually to you. Of course, I'm definitely also looking forward to visiting Goiânia someday. Actually, my first visit to Brazil was more or less 10 years ago, and at that conference, I met with Professor Rejani, who kind of introduced me to the heart of Brazil, as she called it. And ever since then, I've been looking forward to maybe visit someday. But it's really nice to at least be present now virtually and to share a little bit about the future of AI in dentistry. So just to get this out of the way, I don't have any conflict of interest, any connections to any companies or whatever that I will show. So if I show you any figures or information about companies, it's because I choose to and not because I'm being paid for it. So to talk about the future, I think we actually need to talk also about the current state of AI. That will be the first part of the presentation, where I will give a quick overview of what has been going on in research. And then also I'll share a little bit about where we are at the commercial side, that's the industry side of things. And then finally, we'll talk about the future. I'll kind of share my personal point of view about what can be ahead and what are some of the challenges that we will be facing once it's really getting implemented in clinical practice. This is a graph that I update now and then. It's just a simple search of a couple of key terms on PubMed. And it's a bit of a broad search, but it's not including everything related to AI in medicine or in radiology. But you can see that we have just passed a number of publications from 2020, and we still have a couple months, 2 months left in the year. I'm pretty confident that this year there will be about 5,000 publications or more covering these kind of topics. So you can see how just in a few years' time, this research-wise, it has exploded from being kind of a niche, something that was worked on mainly by engineering, computer science people, to something that really involves different disciplines and something that we want to move forward with. And I will show you a couple of examples just to get you up to speed about what has been going on. If we try to categorize a little bit the different applications that we have of AI in medicine, then it starts even before you make images of your patient, for example. And we actually saw some nice example of that in the previous presentation by Professor Bianchi of AI being implemented in clinical decision support. And one way it can be used is to tell you which imaging modality is recommended for a given patient based on their general characteristics and maybe a clinical examination. And then we have the image acquisition itself. This was something that I work on myself. And I think the main area of interest right here is the work that is being done on CT reconstruction in incorporating deep learning. So I will have one example of that coming up. Different types of image processing. So one of the next presentations by Dr. Lahoud will talk about segmentation. And I think that's the prime example of how to use AI in an advanced image processing to help with diagnosis, treatment planning, and risk assessment. Then there's the diagnosis itself. I now call it kind of screening because I'm a bit hesitant to call it diagnosis when an AI is involved, because as I will talk about later, the end diagnosis probably is not going to be done by an AI anytime soon, but it can perform some type of assessment of pathology on different types of images. And then the treatment planning, which is a topic of Professor Jacob's talk later this session, also has an important potential for AI to be implemented. And then also follow-up. I think I don't have an example of follow-up coming, but there's definitely a lot of potential there as well. And in fact, there are specific algorithms that are aimed for comparing for patients over time, comparing the same type of data recurring over time. So here's an example of AI being used in reconstruction. A lot of research has been done. They often focus on either low dose data, meaning very noisy data, or missing data. And here's an example of scans where you have only a very limited projection angle. In this particular research, they had projections covering an angle of only 80 degrees, and the minimum you need is 180. And if you would reconstruct that kind of simulated data using the algorithm that we use nowadays, it will look like this, very poorly. But using a particular type of network based on AI, they could clean up this kind of reconstruction quite a lot and get a lot of diagnostic information back. Here's an example of a more combination of segmentation and diagnosis. So this is a study in which they trained an AI to detect caries, but also just to diagnose, or sorry, to segment the different parts of the teeth, and also to detect metal restorations or any other type of restorations. A lot of the work I'm focused on is dealing with radiography or tomography, but there's also some very nice work being done on intraoral photography. And here's one example of a study also focusing on caries detection based on intraoral photographs. Bone assessment. This is a study from 2 years ago from Germany, in which they try to classify parts of intraoral radiographs based on their periodontal status. On the top, in the top row, you can see the ones for which the AI showed a high probability for bone loss, and you can kind of see for yourself that these are valid predictions. And the bottom row shows the images in which the probability here is very low, and you can see that these are indeed looking like healthy conditions. Here's another example. I presented this one. I selected this one because of the way that they show their output. So the aim here was to detect different types of tumors or cysts on panoramic radiographs. And what the AI, in this case a neural network, can give you is a probability, and it can give you probably for different types of cysts or tumors. But they can also give you this kind of heat map that indicates which locations are at risk for having this kind of pathosis. Tooth numbering, that's an example of segmentation. there's a couple of studies both covering intraoral radiography and panoramic radiography, and you can see that it can be quite successful even when teeth are missing. A well-trained AI can still overcome that issue and correctly detect and identify different teeth. Cephalometry, Professor Bianchi mentioned that AI research goes back to the 80s, and some of the first applications were in fact focusing on cephalometric analysis using, at the time, more straightforward algorithms, let's say, to perform this analysis. But now then you have renewed interest in this application. There's a bunch of studies that try to automate cephalometric landmark identification and tracing. And here's just one example of a study that tried to predict a surgical outcome using AI. In this case, they predicted what happens to the soft tissue for different types of surgical interventions based on, this can be based either on facial scans or on any type of 3D scan that allows you to segment the facial profile. So if I would give my point of view about the current state of AI research, there are a lot of applications. I just touched the surface. I just showed you a couple of examples, but there's so many examples of applications found in current literature, and the results are typically quite promising. There's a couple of things also that I think you should consider. First of all, the fact that these studies are mostly exploratory. This kind of makes sense. This is a hype, unlike most of us have ever seen. So a lot of us are trying to perform research on something. We're testing it on a type of network on a type of task, and we're publishing it because it is something new. So we're exploring a lot, which is great to do, but it doesn't mean that a lot of this research is ready for clinical implementation. A very common problem is that a lot of this research is being performed on limited sample sizes, both for training and for validation and testing. In many cases, the data is annotated manually. This applies to both diagnosis and segmentation. So of course, if you have a single person annotating your data and preparing it for training, the AI will never be able to perform better than that particular person. So you're kind of relying on human expertise, which is just a limitation that we have to deal with. And we also see that there's often a lack of a true benchmark when you want to test your model. When you have a certain performance of a trained AI model, you really want to compare it with either another type of algorithm or with human experts. And this step is often a little bit lacking in research. But moving on, just a few words about the commercial side of things. I'm personally more invested and interested in the research side, but it's good to keep an eye on what's going on at the commercial side. And here, the fact that I don't have a conflict of interest comes into play, because I'm not trying to show you every product and every company that uses AI in dentistry. So to keep things more or less objective, I'm just showing you here the ones from the list of exhibitors from the last international conference of dental maxillofacial radiology. These are the ones that I found among the list that mentioned some type of AI, deep learning, machine learning being used in their product line. But we also see in research some studies that are using commercial AI solutions. So in those kind of research papers, you may not find information about training, about validation, as you will find in most other AI research, but they are taking an already developed product and they're testing it out. Again, I just chose the ones that I know of and that I selected myself. The two first ones, they use a software called Diagnostic. And the bottom one is actually from Brazil, from a group in Sergipe, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, that used a software called CephBot to check its performance for cephalometric landmark detection. One question that pops up when you talk about commercial implementation of AI solutions is how to really regulate them. These products, let's call them softwares, they're a little bit different from typical softwares that you would use in your radiological workflow. They are, in fact, medical devices in the sense that they can affect the well-being of your patient. They will affect the diagnosis, they will affect the treatment planning, the treatment outcome, and therefore they need to be carefully regulated to make sure that they work the way they're supposed to, and they also work accurately enough to benefit the patient. And earlier this year, the US FDA has recognized that these AI machine learning based products, they need a bit of a special attention, that they cannot be judged in the same way that they would judge previous technology used in medicine. So don't try to read all of this, but I underlined the keywords here. The FDA acknowledged that the medical device regulation that they had and still have in place is not really designed for AI. It's not so much about the initial approval of the product. That can be quite similar to any other medical device, but it's the fact that AI products, they really change over time. And the general rule is that when you change a software, a medical device software, in a significant way, when you update it and you expect it to change its basic function and the way it behaves, then you need to review your approval. But these AI-based softwares, they kind of change significantly. So does that mean they have to be reviewed continuously? That is something that is still a little bit under discussion, but it's definitely a topic of interest. I looked up how many AI-based algorithms or softwares have been approved. These are numbers you can find for the US FDA. I expect at least the number to be more or less the same for the European market and, for example, the UK market. I'm not sure where to find this information for the Brazilian market. But you can see a fair amount of algorithms that have been approved, that have gone through the necessary procedures to get this high-level approval and to therefore be used on patients. By the way, among this list, I couldn't find any particular one focusing on any dental application. What's interesting to me is that a lot of the commercial involvement at the moment involves startup companies. This is interesting because it may change the way that we will implement it, or it may affect the way that we'll implement it. You certainly have all the big players, all of the big CT companies, all of the big dental companies working on it. But next to that, you have a lot of startup companies that are collecting quite a large amount of funding. Even recently, it has been increasing a lot, and they will play a role in the market. And it's very interesting to see how this will affect the implementation side of it. And of course, this story will be a little bit different when you're working in a big hospital where you have AI tools that can be relatively easily plugged into a PACS system, or when you have smaller clinics where you have a kind of a particular software, a particular environment, and we'll have to see how these AI tools can be fitted in that case. There's also some guidelines already available about buying or purchasing AI tools. I just quoted, which I feel was the key point of this particular guideline called Éclair. You have to look at the relevance of the solution of the software. That's I think makes sense. Performance and validation, that is something for you, to kind of learn how to evaluate this. Usability, okay, and then integration, this is probably a key point. So how can this really be practically integrated in the workflow that you're currently used to? Regulatory and legal aspects, very important as well, especially because they are not quite in place in many countries. So if you buy something now, you kind of have to make sure that in a few years, you'll still be able to use it, to be allowed to use it. Financial and support services, I think the main point here is service or support over time. Will you be able to receive updates? Because the point of AI is that it will learn and typically improve over time. And if you purchase any kind of solution, will you be able to use those that improved performance? So a few more things now about the future of AI. A lot of this is my opinion. I know that there's differing opinions. There's very strong opinions by certain people, but I think the take-home message is that we really have to wait and see in many cases what will happen. A couple of years ago, there was already some evidence found in literature that there's concern about AI being implemented in medicine and particularly in radiology. This paper focuses on non-dental radiology, where they found out that radiologists think that, well, maybe their discipline is going to become obsolete at some point. We did a survey about this in focusing now on dental students and dental professionals. This is a survey we did about 2 years ago. And we found that, yeah, indeed, 1/3 of the people that we surveyed had some degree of concern about AI and how it may impact their work. But we did a particular setup in which we took the survey. We then allowed the participants to attend a lecture about AI, about 1 hour long typically. And then they took part of the survey again to see if that information they got has affected their answer a bit. Of course, we can definitely introduce some bias using this lecture, but we try to present just the basic aspects of AI and see if that changes their mind. And yes, we did notice that the concerns were alleviated after a brief lecture. So some of it was at least founded in a lack of knowledge rather than it being a true concern. So that was something that we found interesting. So the big question, yeah, will radiologists be replaced? I think I've been giving a couple lectures now about AI, and this is a question that will often pop up. And the answer is no. And well, actually, I should say the answer that I think is true is not yet, at least. The timeline for me is impossible to predict. I wouldn't put too much trust in anyone who wants to give an exact timeline. So I would say no, radiologists will not be replaced, not yet, but they will have to adapt. This is a new technology. So just like when you had the introduction of cone beam CT in dentistry or any other groundbreaking technology, there will be some degree of adaptation needed. If you have this AI tool, if you really boil it down to the essence, it will give a prediction. For example, in this case, the probability of a lesion being there. And then there's really two possible outcomes. Either you accept this prediction or you overrule the prediction because you see it differently. And to be able to do this in the most efficient manner, there's first of all some language that you will need to learn. You'll need to pretty much be able to judge for a given AI application how trustworthy are these predictions. And that involves probably getting to know a little bit about the nitty-gritty of what was behind this development. And secondly, also you'll have to get familiar with colors again, because I showed you one example of a heat map showing some spots that need further attention. And I think this is a nice way of using AI to, what they say, augment your experience, to have some degree of screening or pre-diagnosis that can help the radiologist or whoever is doing the reporting to treat or to plan the treatment. If at some point, of course, we find out that AI has completely surpassed humans for any particular task, then yeah, it's actually going to be in the patient's benefit to then let an AI take over completely. But when this will be and for which tasks this will be, hard to say. But what I can tell you is that this will happen quite gradually. So if you're really thinking about AI performing better than radiologists for a given task, it depends on a few factors. I think that a big one is the availability of data. If you train AI to detect caries, you can pretty much easily get a hold of a lot of data used for training. If you compare that, if you want to train an AI to detect some kind of rare tumor or a cyst, for example, then you just don't have a lot of data to work with, which will impact the capacity of the AI to train. It depends on the complexity as well. You have intraoral radiographs being the least complex. You have panoramic radiographs, a little bit more tricky because you have distortion, you have magnification. You have cone beam CT being more complex simply because of the fact that they are 3D. But also the complexity and heterogeneity of the task itself. Once again, look at caries. There's of course different types of caries, but it will typically manifest in a certain way. So it will be somewhat easier for an AI to be trained to detect this, versus things like osteonecrosis that have different phases that are often starting at different in different ways at different locations, etc. That will be harder for an AI to really train and to eventually outperform radiologists. The target population, this is kind of related to the first one. The more people you have with this particular issue, the more data you will have. But I'm also thinking a little bit at the commercial side that, well, you have to imagine a company or any type of research institute to invest their time and resources in something. It will be more interesting if eventually it will be able to be applied on many patients. And also the availability of ground truth data. So imagine training an AI for on intraoral radiographs. In many cases, you can use chromium CT scans to give you a correct label, a correct annotation. If you are using, if you're training it on CBCT, you can use histology, but this is just not always possible. And this will also affect the ability of the AI to learn. Like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, if you have a single human expert performing the annotation, then the AI can only reach the level of that expert and not better than it. So yeah, will radiologists be replaced? You could look back at the introduction of robotic surgery, and this may be a little bit of the same story. So I wasn't there when this happened. I'm not a surgeon by any means, but I can imagine that when you first had robot surgical tools being used in clinic, that there was some concern by surgeons that they would be replaced. But if you look at these two implementations right here, there's actually more people here around the patient than there would be if there wasn't this robot. So there's someone controlling the robot, there's someone monitoring, etc. So there's definitely no loss of jobs, but there is some adaptation needed by the surgeon and by other people involved. There's still a lot to be said about the ethics of AI. About 2 years ago, there was a pretty big statement made by a joint consortium of European and North American societies. I'm showing kind of the key points, but I will show in more detail the keywords that I found. So these are very big, or at least a big group of organizations that reacted to what they identified at the time was a significant hype being going on in AI. And what they mentioned in their statement was that they feel that responsibility, accountability will remain with humans for the time being. And they kind of repeated this in the last bullet point, saying that radiologists will remain responsible for patient care. On the other hand, they were not too conservative in their statement. They did acknowledge that this new technology will require some adaptation. So you can see in their key points that they mention the need for codes of ethics and practice, and also here at the very bottom, the need for developing new skills to make sure that this technology is used in the best way possible. But of course, it's going to be interesting to see what happens when it goes wrong. So personally, I'm not aware of any instance yet in which an AI was responsible for either a diagnosis or a treatment and something went wrong. But I'm sure that time will come quite soon if it hasn't already. And to give some analogy, there was this article related to a crash about 3 years ago caused by a self-driving car, which was developed by Uber. Long story short, the driver, so to speak, the person behind the wheel, at least of the car, was charged with negligent homicide for this fatal crash. Because they were distracted, they were watching some television show, and they were supposed to at least pay attention while the car is driving itself. So the responsibility in this case remained with the human operator. And they repeated here later that Uber did not face criminal charges, but at the same time, at the very bottom of this article, you can see that because of this single crash, this unfortunate fatal crash, they did immediately end the testing of the technology in Arizona. So in a sense, they went back to the lab, even though you have all this data available about self-driving cars already being safer than most human drivers. if you have a single thing going wrong, a single accident, then you can see the reaction, you can see the caution being taken. And I expect that this will be the same when we translate this to medical implementation of AI, that when things go wrong, I don't say if things go wrong, but when things go wrong, it's going to be interesting to see what will happen. I predict that it's going to be similar to this, that at least as far as I can see in the future, that the responsibility will stay with radiologists, with human practitioners. But let's see. So this is just a standard acknowledgement of the support. So thanks a lot for the attention. Again, this was a really nice event. I'm actually looking forward a lot as well to the next speakers. I'm sure it's going to be really interesting. And if you have any questions, please let me know. So thanks a lot to Professor Maria and everyone involved in the organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ruben Pauwels, for your contribution to this section. I also believe you must embrace rather than be afraid of this new technology. Now, I welcome Dr. Pierre Lahoud to discuss on AI tools for tooth and nerve segmentation, serving autotransplantation and implant placement. Dr. Pierre Lahoud is a dentist, doctor in dental surgery with postgraduate training in advanced medical imaging. In 2018, concluded an internship in clinical training at the University of Leuven and performed his predoctoral research at the IMPATH research group from University of Leuven, focusing on artificial intelligence-driven segmentation for tooth autotransplantation, graduating magna cum laude in July 2020. He is currently a clinical resident in periodontology and oral implantology at the University of Leuven and a PhD student under the promotorship of Professor Jacobs, Professor Dr. Mark Kieran from Leuven, and Professor Michael Borstein from University of Basel, Switzerland. His research topics focus primarily on artificial intelligence-driven planning for treatments and surgeries in the oral and maxillofacial region. Thank you very much, Professor Lahoud.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's really nice to be here, and it's really interesting to see all the interesting research that's being conducted regarding AI by the previous well-renowned speakers. So good evening, esteemed colleagues. My name is Pierre Lahoud. I'm a clinical assistant in periodontology and oral implantology at KU Leuven, as well as a PhD student at the OMFS-IMPATH research group with Professor Jacobs. And with regard to the interesting topics at hand today, I'll be discussing the use of artificial intelligence in oral surgical procedures planning. Now, the last couple of decades have witnessed a huge shift in contemporary dental care, where developments were made to complement scientific evidence with both the clinician's expertise as well as with the patient's needs and concerns. From there, evidence-based dentistry was born and proposed as a solution to drive the decision-making process in accordance with results of clinical trials having high levels of evidence. Evidence-based dentistry has therefore allowed to bring the most recommended treatment options to an entire population, yet at the same time implement some patient-specific characteristics in the equation. Characteristics that are gaining in importance by day with regard to patient-specific planning and treatment proposals. Yet, and despite the clear advantages of patient-specific modeling in dentistry, its use in clinical setups remains scarce. And this is mainly due to the fact that implementation of such technologies require powerful computational hardware, complex dedicated softwares, time, as well as high user experience, all of which delayed the hopes brought by the first proofs of concept published over a decade ago. Current research is therefore aiming to bridge the gap between technology and patient-specific modeling to allow, and with the help of artificial intelligence, for streamlined, fast, and accurate analysis and treatment plannings for procedures such as implant placement and tooth autotransplantation. In our research group, and given the growing trend for procedures such as CBCT-guided tooth autotransplantation, our first aim was the development of a novel AI-driven tool for fast and accurate tooth segmentation on cone beam CT. And the rationale behind the study was that tooth segmentation is exponentially gaining in importance, and its use is becoming increasingly significant for advancements in endodontics, orthodontics, prosthetic dentistry, as well as implantology. Indeed, recent advancement in image processing techniques allowed for the use of tooth segmentation for procedures such as tooth autotransplantation, for seeking answers regarding surgical feasibility and the best position for the donor tooth, while at the same time maximizing aesthetic and function. Also, in guided endodontics, in which it's showing substantial advantages in successfully helping plan and carry out endodontic treatments on challenging yet highly common cases, such as with pulp canal calcification and apical pathologies. Yet, tooth segmentation on cone beam CT remains a labor-intensive task, considering the limited contrast resolution and potential disturbance by metallic artifacts. So fully automated tooth segmentation cannot be achieved by merely relying on cone beam CT intensity variations. Additionally, current segmentation tools offer a fairly limited accuracy for segmentation on CBCT. And this is clearly seen in the current automatic tooth segmentation tools that claim to offer fully automated tooth segmentation by relying on methods such as thresholding and the level set technique, yet fail to deliver at the site of complex yet highly common cases such as immature teeth and beaming artifacts, to name a few. Now, and for the purpose of this research project, and since working with deep learning and artificial intelligence requires a great deal of variability, this study relied on two databases, three cone beam CT devices, voxel size ranging from 80 to 400 micrometers, and a field of view going from 80 by 40 by 40 to 240 by 190 millimeters. These parameters yielded 314 CBCT scans, which are manually segmented by experts in the field of oral maxillofacial radiology, yielding 433 bicam images of segmented teeth that were then divided into training, testing, and validation datasets. From there, several neural network architectures were tested until this panoptic feature pyramid network showed the best results in terms of accuracy and time consumption, and was therefore adopted for this tool. The architecture of this network consisted of three main parts: an encoder, a decoder, and a semantic segmentation branch. The encoder extracted the interesting features from the input image, such as shapes, contours, and intensity variations. The decoder then generated a dense segmentation mask of the input, and the semantic segmentation branch then combined the feature maps from all the layers of the decoder into one single output, being our prediction segmentation of the tooth. Now, for the workflow of the validation procedure, this was done as follows. The three protocols were applied, being the fully manual expert segmentation, the fully automated AI segmentation, and the user-refined AI-driven segmentations, where the user could adjust after the AI's segmentation suggestion. This resulted in three-dimensional CSO contours, which could be verified and adjusted in the refined and expert manual segmentation groups, and finally saved for further precision evaluation. Now, the assessment of the results generated by the three protocols was based on several metrics. First of all, volume comparison analysis as well as Blunden-Altman calculations were performed to evaluate the degree of agreement between fully automated AI-driven segmentations as well as the user-refined segmentations versus our clinical reference, being the expert segmentation. Secondly, the binary images were fed to an intersection over union algorithm to test for the accuracy of overlap between the two AI-driven segmentation techniques versus our clinical reference. Further, the dissimilarity coefficient was calculated based on intersection over union results, since, and while not being as selective as the IOU, is being more widely used for tooth segmentation evaluation by other authors. For the segmentation time assessment, we relied on a module that was implemented in the tool to precisely and objectively record timing for each and every step, going from region of interest selection, rotation, up until saving our results. Lastly, the three-dimensional triangle-based surface of the tooth was reconstructed as a standard tessellation language file, commonly called an STL, on which a side morphologic comparison analysis between the AI-driven results and the reference sample allowed for positive and negative differentiation with regard to the reference image. Now, starting with the volume comparison, no statistically significant differences were found using the three protocols. The Blondin-Uthman method showed a slight systematic decrease in segmentation volume between AI-driven results and the reference sample, consisting of 1.7% for the fully automated AI-driven segmentations and 1.3% for the user-refined AI-driven segmentations, suggesting high agreement between the three segmentation methods. As for the intersection over union, no statistically significant differences were found in any two categories, be it in the division of teeth into full tooth, crown, and root, the division into teeth categories, mainly incisors, canines, and premolars, as well as when accounting for mature versus immature teeth. The mean IOU was 0.88 with a standard deviation of 0.03. And dividing our teeth into crown and root regions showed a slight increase in root accuracies, with IOUs reaching up to 90%. Evaluating segmentation time is where the three methods is where the biggest difference lies. Indeed, expert user segmentation had a mean total time of 6.6 minutes, which saw a 5.5-fold decrease going to the user-refined AI-driven segmentation that then took, on average, 1.2 minutes to complete, and a 13.2-fold decrease when comparing expert user segmentations to fully automated AI-driven segmentations, which took an average 29.7 seconds to achieve. The aforementioned total time accounted for the region of interest selection, rotation, seats placement, and adjustment up until saving. Last but not least, a morphologic surface comparison analysis initiated in Freematic software showed an average mean surface deviation of 7.85 micrometers between expert user segmentation and fully automated AI-driven segmentation, as well as 9.96 micrometers between expert user segmentation and user-refined AI-driven segmentation, both well below the 200 micrometers cutoff value, which clinically accounts for the periodontal ligament. Now, another structure that is crucial to assess, yet remained highly neglected due to the often lack of clear cortication of its borders, is the mandibular canal. We therefore set out to develop and validate a novel, fast, and accurate tool for accurate mandibular canal segmentation on cone beam CT. Now, why is it so important to assess the mandibular canal? Well, the mandibular canal is an important anatomical structure of the mandible, and it houses the mandibular neurovascular bundle. The knowledge of its exact position and relation to adjacent structures is therefore crucial in treatment planning to avoid per- and post-operative complication for a number of procedures such as implant placement, tooth extraction, as well as sagittal split osteotomies. Yet, precise and automatic delineation of the mandibular canal remains a challenging issue, and while several methods have been proposed for automatic mandibular canal tracing, a lack of clear cortication and the presence of anatomical variations makes this task challenging and in various cases inaccurate. Therefore, and while aiming for a robust model with a strong generalizability, included CBCT scans were required using 4 CBCT devices, being the Newton VGI Evo, the 3D Aquitomo 170, the Promax 3D Max, and the Scanora 3DX, from which voxel size varied between 100 and 400 micrometers, and the field of view from 80 by 80 to 230 by 260 millimeters. This yielded 235 CBCT scans, on which various types of data augmentation strategies were applied to artificially increase the dataset and further improve on the generalizability and on the robustness of the model. Here, it allowed for automatic detection and accurate segmentation of the mandibular canal, in contrast to mandibular canal tracing or labeling, which is currently the norm in most surgical planning tools when it comes to mandibular canal assessment. Overall result showed successful implementation of the deep learning algorithm for the mandibular canal segmentation. The mean IOU of the validation was 0.63. The mean dissimilarity coefficient was 0.77. Precision, recall, and accuracy had mean values of 0.78, 0.79, and 0.99 respectively. Hausdorff distance had a mean value of 0.7, and the total time from uploading to visualization was 21 seconds. Now, the approach used in the study allowed for a significant improvement in currently available tools, especially considering that, to the best of our knowledge, this is the first study where segmentation as opposed to mandibular canal tracing was performed using artificial intelligence. The developed techniques may open further doors for advancement in AI technology with regard to automatically detecting accessory canals and anatomical variations, such as in the symphysial area of the mandible, accurately assessing the relationship between the mandibular canal and the third molar, all while improving on the robustness and time consumption of deep learning models. Such tools could help us, therefore, in accurate patient-specific modeling, for example, to individually assess the changes occurring following transplantation, be it in root development, periodontal healing, and bone remodeling, as well as their potential link to factors such as biomechanical forces, nerve functions, and other patient-specific parameters. And in building multifactorial models capable of helping clinicians in their optimal planning for procedures such as implant placement and tooth autotransplantation, to name a few, which will lead to a number of state-of-the-art tools valuable for both clinicians and researchers in their preoperative surgical design, treatment option proposals, and follow-ups, and therefore helping us evolve from evidence-based dentistry into precision dentistry. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Lahoud. Very interesting. It's very nice to learn from people so young like you yourself. Thank you.
Thank you
Finally,
very much.
Okay. Thank you too. Finally, I would like to welcome Professor Jacobs, who is a great mentor for many of us. Professor Jacobs is dentist, periodontologist, doctor in dental science, and master in dental radiology. She's full professor at the University of Leuven and visiting professor at Karolinska Institute in Sweden and the Dalian Medical University in China. Professor Jacobs is heading the IMPATH research group of the University of Leuven. She is Secretary General of the International Association of Dental Maxillofacial Radiology. She is also section editor of several dental journals and involved in many multidisciplinary and inter-university research collaborations, with a specific focus on imaging research, artificial intelligence, and bioprinting. She has been actively participating in 5 European projects and is co-author of 5 books and more than 450 publications in peer-reviewed journals, besides multiple invited lectures and publications in other journals or books. It's a great honor to have you here, Professor Jacobs.
Hello, my name is Reinhilde. I'm from Leuven University, and it's a pleasure to close this session with my lecture on AI-assisted treatment planning. I would like to thank the organizers of this UFG international meeting, especially Maria Alves, for inviting me. I'm also Secretary General of the International Association of Dentomaxillofacial Radiology, and I would really recommend you to go and have a look at our website, see our activities, such as our World Tour in 2023, our educational activities and webinars during the next 2 years. I've also a website for our research group in Leuven, where you can actually go to see the team members involved in the research, and at the same time also go and check for the different articles published in the field of AI. And when I speak on AI, I speak on the collaboration between engineers and clinicians, because without both of them, this research cannot be done. And for that, I also thank Relu, who has been helping us during the last 2 years to develop and publish everything what will be discussed today. And I start with the arrival in Leuven of Professor André Leite, who actually published first an overview and then a very nice article on 2D segmentation of panoramic radiographs. All of that can be actually found on our website. At the same time, meanwhile, and as AI is really advancing a lot, Mauricio Gerard, who also arrived in Leuven last year, he published a book chapter giving you an overview on AI in dentistry. And a lot of other publications are upcoming or listed on our website, so please have a look. As you have seen from the previous lectures, AIs can be there for image correction, but also for organ detection, organ segmentation, diagnosis, treatment planning, and prediction of treatment. And at the same time, AI is also very efficient and accurate. But it can lead to errors in classification. We all know that typically when we go to Google and we type a name, like for example, sheepdog, we might also sometimes see the mobs. And the same happens when we type in Chihuahua, then we may end up in muffins saying. Our research started with 2D AI, and it started with Myrtle Franks doing a research together with the engineers of Relu, who at that time were still students at Leuven University. And Myrtle wanted to have a prediction model for third molar eruption, with the first image taken around the age of 10 or 11, and then being able to see if the wisdom tooth would actually fully erupt or not. And this was fully automated and actually led to good prediction of third molar eruption or removal. And this, of course, can then lead to further implementation in the software, which is currently also used for further research being done at Karolinska Institute in Stockholm. At the same time, in our team, André Leite was busy with the segmentation of the teeth on 2D images. And this allowed us not only to segment all the individual teeth, but also label them. And even if they were missing or transposed, it would still be labeled correctly, and there would be no error of classification. And André was so good in all of this that he actually could really mimic and learn the AI to mimic his own performance as a human, which you see here as AI detection versus human reference. And the red and the blue small parts at the tips of the crowns and the incisor edges are actually the minor errors or minor disagreements between André and the AI. This all can be found in a publication in Clinical Oral Investigations published last year. At the same time, we had also an important move towards CBCT. And CBCT combined with AI has, of course, many more potentials, not only for diagnosis. But before doing so, one must understand that CBCT is actually a generic term for more than 280 models. And I refer to the article of Professor Guetta, who has made a brilliant overview, tabulated all those 280 models. The main conclusion is that the CBCT is only a generic name, but that the 280 models perform very differently. And you can see that at the level of image quality and also dose. On the upper row, you see 7 different image qualities of 7 different machines, but even in the same machine, there can be a lot of differences. In the lower row, you see 7 times the same cone beam, but with different protocols, leading to a 50 times difference in dose. Moreover, there is also a big classification of these 280 models with an upper cloud who has a few cone beams only being really of excellent performance, a middle cloud of all the other cone beams, and then a third lower cloud of cone beams that are not performing that good. This is research which we also performed with Victor Aquino, who stayed for a year with us. And actually, once you introduce metal in the middle cloud, you will have a number of these cone beam image qualities going down to the lower cloud, being absolutely not so good anymore. And this is important because when you use AI, the best AI can of course be trained from the best cone beams, but it should also be able and capable to deal with the inferior quality. And we have to say that cone beam, we all think it's mainly used for diagnosis, but that's not really true. The success of cone beam is actually determined by the vertebral planning. 2/3 of all the cone beams are taken for the vertebral planning. And this leads us to CBCT-driven automation of treatment and of even creating treatment tools. And this you can actually see here, because here you actually see the article of CBCT-driven automation for detection, segmentation, prediction, and treatment planning. We were able to have accurately segmented all the individual teeth, having them accurately segmented and labeled, even if they are missing or transposed. We also are able to do that not only for the teeth, but also for the maxilla, the mandible, and the maxillofacial complex, and even the sinuses, which I will show in a minute. And all of this facilitates the planning, such as Pierre has shown for autotransplantation, where you can significantly reduce the human segmentation from 1 hour to actually less than 1 minute. And this is the article that Pierre already referred to, but I really recommend you for having a look at it. And it allows us now to have automated tooth segmentation in less than a minute, which can also lead to other applications, such as investigating the eruption of teeth in a cleft patient, which has been shown by Al-Kitani et al. Another important application is for sure the neurovascular damage of implant placement. We all know that 50% of the neural damage is caused by direct damage to the nerve, but 50% is caused by internal bleeding, caused by the implant placement or the drilling procedure. So we need to visualize this entire neurovascular bundle to ensure that we avoid neurovascular damage. And this can best be done also by automation of this neurovascular canal, as has been shown by Pierre. And we continue with that to reach also an AI for fully automated, secure, and fast implant placement, incorporating the safety zone with the nerve, the optimal implant placement when it comes to bone quality and bone quality. But for that, we need to segment all the individual structures, such as the maxillofacial complex, the mandible, the nerve, the teeth, the maxillary sinuses, and I will show all of them in a minute. Here you see the teeth with the maxillary complex moved away as such that you can have a better view on all the roots. You at the same time see the transparent mandible with the jawbone, nerve, and teeth included. And here you see it next to the CBCT images, which are then also colored, helping you to better understand and better plan the anatomical structures. And it does not matter when there is metal artifact, because different researchers trained the AI to overcome this artifact and really segment still accurately the teeth and the jawbone. And you see this here presented for the wisdom tooth with mandibular canal, and at the same time, should you actually remove the mandible to also see the relationship of the teeth with the mandibular canal without the mandible shown. And also compare that to the CBCT cross-sectional images where the nerve is shown in close relationship to the wisdom tooth. And you see that here also presented on a model of both 3D and CBCT. And this, of course, can also have implications for further planning, as we showed before. And even more, Nicole Oliveira and Fernando Piccoli, they actually realized the retromolar canal visualization through this automated nerve segmentation. And this is, of course, crucial because it can allow us to see and not overlook anatomical variations that can have a significant impact on treatment planning. And you see it here with the mandible included, with thanks to Fernando and Nicole. And at the same time, we not only have to look to the mandible, but also to the maxilla. Because in the maxilla, we then have also the sinus. And the maxillary sinus is as essential for the maxilla as is the mandibular nerve for the mandible. Because when extracting a tooth, you can damage the sinus floor. And at the same time, when you place an implant to replace the tooth, then it can be that there's not enough bone and that you will be touching the sinus or even grafting the sinus. For this, I would like to thank for the development, not only the RELU team, but especially Dr. Nermine Morgan, who has spent a lot of time to really and accurately design this sinus AI and train it for perfection. And this allowed her to then visualize the teeth also together with the maxillary sinus, and even when the tooth is removed, to then see how much bone is left and how much sinus is taking this edentulous place, which has consequences for implant placement and potential need for grafting. So, in a nutshell, the AI-based CBCT is there to assist our future, and it can lead us to CBCT-driven automation of treatment. And I will show in a minute, actually, the video composing all of this together. But before that, I would like to thank my team and my team members, because not only the clinical specialists, but also the engineers perform a brilliant task in training and developing these AI tools. And even people from worldwide contribute, and special thanks to Israel for giving us some support with image data. Having said that, I would like also to invite you to our IDMFR World Tour in 2023, where we'll definitely also come back and lecture more on the AI. And at the same time, you have to realize that we also plan a physical event in the headquarters of IDMFR in Brussels, Belgium, where you all are very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this wonderful lecture, Professor Jacobs. For joining us at the discussion section, I welcome our moderator, our dear Professor André Leite, who is dentist, oral and maxillofacial radiology specialist, master and PhD in health science at the University of Brasília. Currently, he's associate professor at the University of Brasília and just came back from University of Leuven, where he spent 2 years working as a postdoctoral researcher on artificial intelligence in oral radiology. Thank you very much, Professor André Leite. I would also like to invite all the speakers to our discussion section. Professor Jacobs will not join us at this moment since she is attending another congress in Italy, and she's now exactly in transit from one congress to another. We can wait for Professor Jonas, and Professor Dr. Pierre will join us in a few minutes. Please, André, you have the word.
Thank you, Professor Maria Alves. I'm very happy and honored to be here, acting as a moderator in this webinar. It's a pleasure. You know our collaborations and our relationship, so it's a pleasure. Even more because I strongly admire all the speakers and also the other organizers. So we can. I'm certain that we will have a rich discussion right now. Let's wait a little bit for the other speakers. They will enter. They are entering the room. But in the meanwhile, I would like to thank you, Professor Maria, to invite me. It's a big pleasure. You know that you are a great reference, not only as a person, but as a professional. After a long time of collaboration with UFG, University of Goiás, I can consider, I'm allowed to consider myself as to consider Goiânia as my second house and UFG also. So thank you. Following the chat, I could notice that we have a qualified audience, a lot of undergraduate and postgraduate students, professors from various parts of Brazil. It's a great pleasure. So we can start our discussion. Carla collected the questions. We have some questions here. I will ask also some questions to the speakers. So let's start our discussion, our rich discussion. Thank you so much. First, I have a question. I don't know if Professor Bianchi is able to enter in this room. I think that he's not here.
We can wait a little bit. Meantime, we can ask for Professor Ruben Pauwels.
Maybe we can start with Ruben. Ruben, nice to see you again. We had a great time in Leuven in 2019. You know, before your departure to Denmark, and I would like to express my gratitude because we had time when I was in Leuven. We had time to discuss several projects, including the ones from Victor, Hugo. So thank you. Your technical knowledge of CBCT and artificial intelligence is impressive. I learn a lot from you and from your articles. So thank you. My question, not my question, the question from Gustavo. He would like to know if... No, sorry, for you, from Professor Rejane, someone that I admire a lot too. And here, considering interoperability and the need to think about health information integrated to national health system, she wants to know your opinion about treatment planning and how to combine health records, as far as I understood, health records of the patients, of the individuals, with image information?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, and of course the answer is going to depend a little bit on what is available in health system wise in different countries. So the more public the health system is, the more easy it will be. Okay, I can see a small adjustment to the question now. So a specific answer, I don't know if if I can really say what would be the best way of doing this. I would say that in a way it's already ongoing. So we kind of have to take a look outside of our world, which I don't like to say it, but in many cases we can look at medicine to see what they are doing there. It's simply because it's a bigger field. It often means that they're often a little bit earlier to implement new technology and to bring it to practice. So we can look at them and see how it goes and learn from that, I'd say. We can also even look at things outside of medicine. AI as such is not particularly a new field. The implementation of different types of AI technology, of course, it depends if you're talking about things that affect people, affect patients, or other things. But I feel like there's already a lot of information available that we can learn from. I know that's not a very specific answer, but that's what I would say about this.
Thank you. I have one more question to you. It was really important and interesting that you showed in your lecture that we have a lot of limitations concerning the published studies. They are exploratory, small data sets. But I would like to know, and you also showed us some commercial applications, but I would like to know your opinion, how we can transform the research results into softwares or maybe some applications that can be widely used worldwide in dental practice. In fact, we can, if you can use them clinically, and maybe you can comment if you consider that we can use these applications in a short term, for example.
Yeah, I briefly touched on it in my presentation, but it's good maybe to elaborate a little bit more about this. When it comes to moving from research to application, I think this is the first time we see something moving as fast and booming as much as it has been. So what we see at the moment is that we have softwares already, we have products already, but we don't often have regulations in place. So that's one thing to consider, that any product that you have available now, maybe at some point the regulations will catch up, and that product or that company will have to prove that their product is working as intended and that it's developed using all available codes regarding patient data protection and anything like that. In a more practical sense, how to bring it to practice, I'm interested to find that out myself, because I'm sure that a lot of dentists, radiologists, any dental practitioner is used to their current workflow, their current softwares. Often they use the software provided by the manufacturer of the imaging equipment. And it's going to be interesting to see if you have another software available that has an AI implementation, if that will lead the practitioner to switch completely to a completely different workflow, because it may be a little bit tricky to integrate specific AI tools in current workflows. Unlike what you see in hospitals where you have PACS systems, there it's a little bit more feasible to have modules or something that are purchased separately that can be combined into the PACS system. In dentistry, it may happen a little bit differently, and there will be probably a lot of competition coming up soon between the established manufacturers of imaging equipment and software and all of the new players that you have, the startups, etc., that probably want to provide not only a module that can do a particular AI task, but a complete radiological tool that allows the practitioner to stick to one software, to one environment, rather than having to export to some AI imports and then write the reports.
Yeah. My main concern is because we have because such applications were developed considering the reality of the places when they were developed. So how to improve the generalizability of the results, and we can and for using these such applications in a large scale. That's my main concern, and I agree with you. You mentioned it in your lecture, and I think that it's a challenge. It's a true challenge. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ruben, again.
Thank you, André.
Thank you. Thank you for being a reference for all of us.
No, thank you.
Professor Jonas, nice to meet you. I think
Hello,
that
Professor.
it's the first time that we are together, even remotely, but it's the first time we are together. I had a great opportunity to read some of your articles. It was a great pleasure and to learn also with you. And I have one question from the audience here, from Gustavo. Wait a little bit. Gustavo wants to know if you have any tip for segmenting in colored images. And
Okay.
he has, I don't know if you want to answer this question first, but he has another question. If AI can help to identify patterns besides the huge amount of information on clinical images, for example. I think that as far as I understood, he wants to know if it's possible to combine clinical data. Also, it's a similar question that I asked Ruben. If it's possible to combine a huge amount of clinical data, maybe you can comment on your reality regarding TMJ evaluation with images.
Okay.
The combination of clinical information for TMG evaluation or segmentation, if you want to comment on this.
Yeah.
Thank you for accepting our invitation, Professor.
Thank you very much. Actually, it was my pleasure. As I'm from Brazil as well, I know how it is hard to organize those events, and especially international. So it's not so common in our university. So I really appreciate all the work that you guys did, Maria did, and all the organization. And all the students that are online right now. So I congratulate you, because I know that's hard listening English without subtitles. So I'm pretty sure that you are doing your best, and do not worry if you are not understand everything. You'll get better within time. You just need to practice, practice, and practice. Listen, listen, listen. And about the question, I saw the questions in the chat. I was online. I wasn't live because I was in the train getting to San Francisco. I live in a city a little bit far away from here, so it took about 1 hour. And I think he asked that because I showed a condyle that we extract the image from the trabecular bone, and then we did what we call data mining. What we try to find some hidden patterns into the image, and we try to translate that to some findings, or if you can have some answers from that image that we couldn't see anything in the naked eye. So for colorful images, I don't know if he's talking about photos of periodontitis, for example, or photos of caries. So I would say that what is the gold standard for diagnosis nowadays? Gold standard usually involves the clinician diagnosis, and sometimes we can use biomolecular diagnosis as well. We can do imaging exams, so it's a combination, right? Uh, if you try to do AI only for doing diagnosis, will be hard. You usually need to have this combination, and then AI will be one tool that will help us. And if he wants to extract useful information for colorful image, he could do that, but I would suggest that that needs to be some image that a clinician cannot do a diagnosis with only with the image. So let's say that he has 1,000 photos of initial caries, but in the naked eye, you cannot see anything in the crown. You see just a white surface with a slight white spot. I'm just giving an example of caries, not TMJ, because TMJ I talk about. And then you have 1,000 of images, and then you have those patients in a year from now, and from that 1,500 develop caries or start having caries. So at the naked eye, you could identify the caries, but then in 1 year, you identify which patients developed caries. So you could take those 1,000 images. You can extract that area or a single photo of that area, and then you can train machine learn telling, oh, this area here, this is carry, this is carry, this is carry, even though it is not carry and you didn't know at that time, but you know that became carry. And then you extract the information from that image. So which information can I extract? You can extract a lot of information from image. So you can extract organization of the pixel, how the colors are distributed into the image, the structure, the geometry, the angulation, the contrast. So there's many variables or texture variables that you can extract that just that information won't tell you anything about it. But the machine can learn from that. And then when you have a new image that in the naked eye you cannot do any diagnosis, you can input into your clinical decision system. And then the AI can give you, oh, this probably will become a carrier because of those patterns that we found here. But as a clinician, you couldn't find that. So I gave one example that may help him answer this question. It can be applicable to other areas, perio, endo, or CBCT image, or 3D models. But this is the basics and how he needs to think about how to extract features and when is needed to extract features, because sometimes you don't need to. Was I clear?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. One question from myself now. I was particularly interested in your study related to radiomics. I have read your article. It's really interesting and it was a fantastic article. And I know that we have some challenges to define the region of interest when we try to extract features from a 2D or a 3D image, and to achieve quantitative information on such images. So my question is, how I think that it's maybe you can comment on this. My question is, please comment on the challenge that we face to define the region of interest manually and also automatically. Maybe you can comment on this.
Okay, yeah, that is the biggest challenging
I know.
nowadays. Yeah, we need to, yeah, we try to get that automatically, because imagine that we have our condyle, right? So condyle is a 3D structure, and there's physiology and bone remodeling occurring inside of the condyle. How you define the best region of interest? So because if you take the whole region of interest, the whole condyle, it may not tell you anything, so you need to select a region of interest, but at the same time you have 100 patients and you need to select the same region of interest. So we could try to train a software for doing automatic extraction of the region of interest. But for that, you have to have a large amount of data and provide first all manual extractions. So we need to do manually all the extractions and tell the software this is the region that you want to. So, but this go towards the data science that I talk about. So even before, we don't talk that a lot about data science, because we usually just give our data to data scientists and engineers, and we ask them, oh, I need to do this diagnose. But the data science is going from the ROI, for example, region of interest selection. And for having a good region of interest, or how you select your region of interest, you usually want to have a standardized image. So if you have a condyle that the CBCT was taking, the head was in a tilted position, and the following CBCT was taken in another position, even though there are not big changes, small change will influence you when you try to extract your region. So first, you need to do a 3D positioning of your model or your image, And you may even use landmarks. So nowadays, what we've been doing, we're using landmarks, manual landmarks, and then we try to correspond the image in a certain place of the space. And I personally use manual extraction of the ROI. But that's not the ideal. What we are doing now is trying to work with AI to training the machine to do automatically extraction of any region that you want to have. So this is kind of the research going on right now. It's exactly what you asked about, how to perform a good data extraction and region of interest.
Thank you, Professor. We have one more question from Professor Ruben. We still have time, so we can do it right now. He commented based on your lecture, and the question is: data normalization can be difficult when working with images from different CBCT devices. Can data augmentation be used as an alternative for data normalization? Since it can compensate for differences in sharpness, brightness, contrast, noise as well, or it's not as efficient?
Yeah, great question, Rubens. Thank you very much for the question. And also, it's a pleasure being here with all of you. So for me as a speaker, I'm really, really grateful for being able to talk to you all. We did some data augmentation condiles for trying to create fake condiles, just models, not volumetric images. And that was, I would say that we had good results because we need to have different models for different degenerations for condiles, so more degraded condyle, less, and so on. And we trained machine with that, and we achieved good results. As researcher, I would say that that's fine, that's good if you use that. But as clinician, I'm more worried about the how much that is reality in comparison to the clinic. So if I create a fake condyle, even though it's based on other condyles, how that will be translated to the clinic? Will I ever have a condyle like that one in clinic? So maybe not, maybe yes. But about CBCT that you asked, uh, it is the normalization for CBCT. We had problems with that because the difference in contrast, sharpness, the difference in even voxel size or VOI region. Uh, I, I I don't know if you could try just to argument our image. I would say first, let's say what is data augmentation, okay? Just to the public knows. So data augmentation, take your image and you start working on that image. So you can you have two different images and then start working the image to try to make them similar as well. So can we do that for CPCT? I think that we didn't do it yet. But I would like to hear your opinion, Dr. Pauwels, about that. Because I think I don't have a clear answer if you could use or not.
Yeah, I was really wondering because I honestly don't know, and I was planning to ask Pierre as well, but I guess he's not back yet, or maybe he won't be able to join. I think it's a great idea to normalize data the way that you have showed it. Regarding data augmentation, I mean, based on my experience with CBCTs, what you get for all these image quality parameters that I mentioned can be so different. So you can try to compensate for that by doing data augmentation. I mean, kind of the basic ones, meaning shift the brightness a bit, shift the contrast, add noise, remove noise. But the problem then is if you do that too much to really make all your CBCTs look similar in a sense, then maybe you're losing some of the information that you can use for training. So
Yeah, that's the
if you
result that
process it
we
too
lost.
heavily,
Yeah. Yeah, we lost we did this data augmentation in a CPCT in 96 patients, and we lost the information that we want to look for it. Because we did a histogram matching with the image. So we make the same histogram for all the CPCT images, and this is a work that Najila is a student from Michigan. She's doing with Dr. Sevidans. She's trying to make the image a standardized image and all the CPCTs. And what we ended up is losing diagnosis power on those images, especially in CPCTs. So then that's why I think that even though we are doing AI with a small sample size, usually 100 to 100, what can compensate that difference? A large sample. So if you had 10,000 CBCTs for change osteoarthritis and control, so we don't need to do that much data augmentation or try to make them standardized. The problem is that we don't have that. So we should try, at least in our acquisition protocol, try to be consistent. And I think we need more guidelines to try to guide the researchers around the world, so we can try to make a collaborative work that may work better.
Yeah, a last comment on this that I'm also interested in is to use more transfer learning. If you want to do research involving multiple CBCTs, to start training it on images that are homogeneous, meaning from one machine, and then do transfer learning to continue and maybe try to generalize your model for different CBCTs. Just talking out of, in a theoretical sense, I haven't tried it out yet, but it's definitely a challenge, I feel.
Yes, what can overcome that are even what you asked before, Dr. André, was about how we can put this in the clinic. How can you literally use those tools? So I think that we should, the world is going towards the cloud system. So we probably will have those tools in a web system that you can add your data, and the web system will anonymize your data first of all, because you can't get patient information. And then the data standardization or normalization needs to be done there. So we can have different centers sending images, and then we may start working and trying to give an answer for the clinician. But right now we are still in the research part, even though there are some companies, as Ruben said. I think we are still a little bit far away from a direct application that you you don't need to take responsibility on that. So I will just use the software, and that's my final diagnose. So no, we are still not far away, but away.
I agree.
I think Maria
I
has a
fully agree.
question. Yeah.
I have a question for any of you because it's a very primary question. So it's no problem. André or Jonas or Ruben, anyone can answer for me. We are conducting a systematic review regarding AI applied to the diagnostic of lesions, cysts, and tumors of the maxillofacial region, of course. And we have a hard time to classify the papers. What can you consider as a good database, for example? I know some lesions are more like denturial cysts are very common and ameloblastomas are very rare. So what can be considered to be a good sample in a paper to analyze this paper and consider it a very good for the systematic review? I know there's not a magical number, but can you give me a clue or what can you do to this? Ruben, want to
Oh,
talk?
I don't have a direct answer to that part, but I do have one suggestion in general is that whenever you have a review about AI, I feel like we have to somehow split up the more recent developments, deep learning, convolutional neural networks, any type of neural network versus AI pre 2010 more or less. There's not an exact year in which one became the other, but that's something I noticed that when you want to do an AI review about a particular diagnostic task, that in many cases you will have some older research that was focused on that task but didn't use neural networks or maybe used something else like active shape models or anything else. We have to be a little bit strict, I feel, about what is outdated, even if it's from end of 2000s. In general, it has been shown that more recently developed algorithms like primarily the CNNs, they are more uniquely suited for most most types of tasks applied to images or any type of multidimensional data. So that was a kind of general suggestion to maybe restrict your review to deep learning, because that's the most relevant.
Great.
And yeah, and for the sample size question, this is really tricky because you see papers with 50 patients in each group. You see research with 500, and how do you define that was a good sample size, right? And even though I have tried to go learn about it, how to define the better sample size for AI, because in traditional statistics, just do a sample size, power, and that's it. We need 20 patients. But for AI, doesn't work like that. So usually you need to try to look previous papers that use similar algorithms. Because usually when the algorithm is cited at first, there's a first paper that cited algorithm, and then they use some database. So try to look at that database with the same algorithm to see if it makes sense, and more research that did the same. If they're achieving good results, that usually means that you have a good sample size.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's the kind of way that you can look to it without compromising and see if it's a good paper or not a good paper, or if the sample size is enough or not enough. And I think Professor André can complement as well his thought.
I agree. I will add only one minor point. I think that when specifically speaking about the subject of your research, I think that the ground truth is also very important, because we need a reference standard, and probably Professor Ruben mentioned it in his lecture. Uh, Sometimes we don't have an histopathological result, so we need to rely on the evaluation of the experts. But okay, but speaking about cysts and tumors, I think that it's preferable to have a confirmation, a diagnostic confirmation, and I think that the gold standard is the histopathology. So I think it's an important point to be considered.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Do you have more questions?
I have one. I was prepared to ask Professor Reinhilde Jacobs, but I think that it's important we can discuss together, considering that artificial intelligence is a current topic. It's noteworthy that we have several applications. We have several possibilities in the present, and Ruben showed us that in the near future. But one point that my team here at UNB, University of Brasília, we are discussing is about education. So I would like to know your opinion, how we can insert artificial intelligence and not only the basic concepts, but also dental applications in the curricula of undergraduate and postgraduate students. I think this is something that we are discussing, the right moment, when and how we can insert this hot topic and current topic. We know that the professional, Ruben, I agree with Ruben. I think that our not yet. I agree with the not yet, but the radiologist, the oral dental maxillofacial radiology will benefit from a second opinion, based on AI algorithms. But we know that our professional dentistry will change in the near future. So how we can insert this topic in our curricula, not only for the postgraduate, but also for the undergraduate students?
I think I absolutely agree that it should be incorporated in training as soon as possible. On the other hand, we are really in this kind of transitional phase. Not only is a lot of the research still ongoing, the implementation is kind of just getting started, or in many cases not even getting started. But that being said, it's good to prepare students already for what's coming, because we kind of know that something is coming at least. And I feel like it is possible to have relatively short sections of AI being incorporated at a basic level in undergraduate programs and a more advanced level in different postgraduate programs, and it's not really needed to really get into the pure mathematics and into a lot of the statistics behind it, while still allowing them to understand what is behind it, what it can do, and very importantly, what are the limitations, what may cause it to lead to wrong diagnosis or to not perform always as well.
Professor Bianchi, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, just a curiosity here at the University of the Pacific. We are in the basic Silicon Valley, and the students there are a lot of technology here. So CPCTs, 3D scanning, 3D printing. So students have access to that. But in the curriculum, we just have workshops and seminars. They don't have a formal lecture on that. That's something that I need, I think, starting here and suggest them. And if you can start back in Brazil, just probably we would start that in the radiology discipline. So that's what they will do here as well, starting the radiology, showing some, because sometimes we try to show the students too much, at least dental students, and they got lost because it's too
Yeah.
much information for them, even
Indeed.
learning basics, right? Yeah. So I think optative classes, optional classes that you can try, make it. I think it's a good start. So the students that have interest on that, they will join and they can learn. As we are doing today, I'm pretty sure that we have many students in the audience.
Yeah. Uh, that the point is when address this topic with the students and how, not only when but how, the amount of information that we need to give them. I think that this is something that we still don't know. Maybe I agree with both of you. I think that we can have some basic lectures and we can add some points and some papers, and they can read and they can ask some questions about the topic. That's the beginning. But I think that in the near future we need to discuss. Maybe that's why I have prepared for I was prepared to ask Professor Jacobs, because she's much involved in the associations, and I think that this should be further discussed in uh, this association and in this forum. Yes, that's it. Yeah.
I believe, André, we need to start from something, and maybe we can start from one lecture or two inside the radiology course, and then after the reality asks for more, we can prepare a complete course as an option, like optional discipline or optional program. So who is more interested can apply to that knowledge. But I agree with you. We need to start from at least telling them that something is different now.
Yeah.
And we're starting to do something different, because they need to be prepared for what's coming.
Yeah, there is, I think, now I'm thinking here a little bit more about the question. We are making dentists, right? They are become dentists in the end. They may be researchers, they may be professor, but most of the students will be dentists. And if you go to a private office, we have many different levels of private office, right? So basic and advanced, but let's take a private office that is state of art. So we have that in Brazil, and then what they are using right now nowadays in the dental office that use AI. So almost nothing. I could tell one big thing, that is the intraoral scanner. So, for example, Iteros, they use AI to help to segment the dentition at the same time that they're doing scanning. And what the dentist will do, he'll just put the scanner there, and then they do scanning, and they had no idea that there's AI involved. So maybe that may be a first topic. Just learn what the real applications that we have now in the office. So when he's doing his scanner and got some error, he may know, oh, it's because this tooth here has a different shape, or this patient has only two teeth, And that's why I'm not getting a good scan, because my machine is not prepared for doing a good scan of this. So
Yeah.
it's just so he has the mindset of thinking, the critical thinking that we want them to have. So maybe look in the applications that we are using now in the office and try to go to that final objective of, oh, let's try to make them understand this. And then as far as we have more applications, we can increase the amount of information that they will need to be a
Exactly.
good dentist.
Exactly. Yes.
Maybe Professor Jacobs and Pierre will not be able to join us, considering the time. Is there any more question from the audience? I will take this opportunity to thank you again, Professor Maria Alves, to thank and congratulate all the organizers. I think that this Congress is really productive and will be, the subjects that are being discussed are really important for dental research. I would like to thank also my university that allowed me to to be here and to be in Leuven for 1 year and a half. It was a great time there. I learned a lot with them. So, on behalf of Carla, that is here, it's a great friend. I would like to thank the OMFS team. I miss them a lot, and it was a great opportunity to learn and to design some projects that some of them are still in are ongoing projects, and we are still working on these projects. So it's a great pleasure to be here and to discuss with so special speakers. It's a good time, and thank you, Professor Maria. Thank you. You are a brilliant host of this event. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I would like to thank again, especially Professor Jacobs, who is now exactly at this moment receiving our student Fernando Piccoli, who is there performing some research in artificial intelligence. And I have not enough words to thank you all for these wonderful lectures and discussion. And again, all the speakers, right? It was very brilliant and a very interesting topic, a very nice way to show everything for us. So this is a very hard work behind, you know that. And for that, for this time, for this disponibility, for the availability to be here, to be nice, we thank you very, very much. I also thank the organizing committee, the Federal University of Goiás, and all these people who join us during this scientific and amazing section. Thank you very much and have a nice week. I don't know if Tulio has some
Additional question?
additional question for us. If the speakers have some final words, we have a bit time for this.
Okay, I can just say goodbye. Thank you again. As I said, it was a pleasure. I'm really happy being here, and thank all the audience for the patience. I'm seeing here 2 hours live, so it's a lot of time. Not only our time, but your time as well. So thanks so much, and keep pursuing your dream. In the end, everything will be fine. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for me as well. Thanks for organizing this really nice event and specifically this session. I think it's really nice to have this focus on this topic specifically. We'll need to revisit the topic over and over again in the coming years because it is evolving so fast, and there's going to be new discussions or new information that will change our discussion. And this is an important step in achieving that. So thanks a lot to everyone involved.
Thank you very much. So
Thank you.
I thank you again, Professor André, because we are most than friends, and I I really need you close to me in the UNB too. And I'd like to thank the audience too.
The same.
And I close this section. I don't know why my camera is not working, but any problem, no problem. We can finish this. And well, I'm again. I thought I was lost in the bits and bytes. So thank you very much for this session. I'm completely grateful for each of you who spent time with us here this morning. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.